When you think about the stars on the defensive line, your mind typically goes to the players on the end that get to the quarterback and put up high sack numbers. The Micah Parsons, Myles Garretts, Aiden Hutchinsons, and so on. But how about the big boys in the middle? Throughout the history of the NFL, there have been many nose tackles that were vital to their defense's success, controlling the middle of the line, eating up space, stuffing runs, and even getting after the quarterback from time to time. Now, these players may not have been household names like the ones I previously mentioned, but they were vitally important for their teams and deserve to be recognized. So let's show some appreciation for the big boys in the middle, starting with Curly Culp, the player considered the greatest nose tackle of all time, going to some of the most renowned nose tackles of the 90s and 2000s like Tony Siragusa and Vince Wilfork, and then finishing off with some of the nose tackles that are still making their presence felt in the game today. Now, not all of these players are listed as nose tackles on their Pro Football Reference pages, since a true quote-unquote nose tackle is only present in a 3-4 defensive scheme. But even for the players that are listed at D-tackle, they still assume the spirit of the nose position, with many widely considering them as a nose tackle during some point of their playing career. Like I mentioned before, we're starting this video with Curly Culp, the 1967 NCAA heavyweight champion and the first-team All-American, was drafted by the Broncos in the 1968 NFL Draft with the intention to use Culp as an offensive guard. But when Denver thought he was too small to play the position at his 6'1", 265-pound frame, he was traded to the Chiefs before even playing a single snap. Culp's origin as a nose tackle was actually during Super Bowl VI, where Chiefs head coach Hank Stram lined Culp directly in front of Vikings center Mick Tingelhoff, which neutralized the Vikings running game and allowed the rest of the Chiefs defensive line to get after the quarterback. So in his 7 seasons with the Chiefs, technically 6 because he played his rookie year on the offensive line, Culp recorded 37 sacks and was a key piece in some dominant Chiefs defenses. Then in 1974, Culp was traded to the Oilers, and this move paid immediate dividends for Houston. The Oilers were 1-5 prior to Culp's arrival, and as soon as he joined the team, they went on a 4-game winning streak and ended the season 7-7. Then in 1975, the Oilers went 10-4 with Culp recording 11.5 sacks while freeing up rush lanes for Houston's other rushers like Alvin Bethea, Robert Brazile, and Ted Washington. Curly made the first team All-Pro and came in second in Defensive Player of the Year voting. Culp was just as productive in Houston as he was in KC, but eventually the tolls of playing in the middle caught up to him as he was released by the Oilers in 1980 and only played 2 games for the Lions in 1981. Culp's legacy is as a pioneer of the nose tackle position in the NFL, and is a legacy of one of the strongest players in the league, with Raiders Hall of Fame center Jim Otto saying that Culp was perhaps the strongest man I ever lined up against. Next up, we have Joe Greene. Joe Greene's dominance is well documented, as in his 13-year career with the Steelers, he accrued 77.5 sacks, made first-team All-Pro 4 times, won Defensive Player of the Year twice, and is a part of one of the greatest defensive units of all time in the Steel Curtain. Joe Greene lined up as the tilted nose tackle in the Steelers' 4-3 defense. According to this article, this alignment was implemented late into the 1974 season, and a quote from Ron Jaworski's book, The Games That Changed the Game, Joe Greene developed this alignment himself out of frustration, and because he hated to get blocked and wanted to make plays. This alignment was immediately effective, as in the AFC Championship game and Super Bowl, the Steelers' defense let up less than 30 rushing yards in each of those games. Greene's role as a nose tackle may not resemble what we typically associate with the position. As Steelers head coach Chuck Noll said, it's an aggressive style of defense because our front 4 isn't sitting and reading the offense. Instead, they're the ones making things happen. The next man up is Bob Baumhauer. Baumhauer had a prolific 9-year career with the Dolphins, all spent at the nose tackle spot. In his 9 years in Miami, Baumhauer made 4 second-team All-Pros, 1 first-team All-Pro, and 5 Pro Bowls. He, alongside fellow 1977 draft pick A.J. Dewey, formed the core of the Killer Bees defense, which was consistently effective during their time as a unit. Even from the nose tackle spot, Baumhauer was able to put up great sack numbers with 39.5 sacks in 9 seasons, with his highest sack total season coming in 1981, where he had 9 sacks, and the Dolphins were 5th in the league in points against. Baumhauer made it to the Super Bowl twice in his career, but unfortunately lost out both times to Washington and San Francisco. Following his playing career, Baumhauer opened a string of restaurants as the owner and CEO of Aloha Hospitality. The next nose tackle is Ken Clark. Clark played 14 years in the NFL, mainly with the Eagles from 1978 to 1987. Clark didn't make his first start until the 1982 season, where he proceeded to only miss one game for the remainder of his time with Philadelphia. Ken Clark could get after the quarterback, as in his career he recorded 59 sacks, with his best sack-producing seasons coming in a 3-season stretch from 84 to 86, where he had 25.5 combined sacks. The Eagles did switch their defensive scheme from a 3-4 to a 4-3 following the hiring of head coach Buddy Ryan. After his time with the Eagles, Clark spent one season in Seattle and then finished out his career with the Vikings, with his last season coming in 1991. The next player started his career primarily rushing the passer as a defensive end, but eventually moved to the nose tackle position later in his career and still found great success there. Joe Klecko was a beast on the Jets' New York Sack Exchange defensive line. In the 1981 season, Klecko had 20.5 sacks and was second in Defensive Player of the Year voting. But that's when he was still a defensive end. In 85, the Jets switched from a 4-3 to a 3-4, so Klecko was moved to the middle and assumed the role of nose tackle for the Jets. And just like in every other position that he played throughout his career, Klecko found success in his new role. In his first season as nose tackle, Klecko made first team All-Pro, and the Jets led up the third least rushing yards during that season behind the 85 Bears and the New York Giants. The Jets were tied for first in opponent rushing yards per attempt, and Klecko had a lot to do with that. But he was still able to get to the quarterback, recording 7.5 sacks in that season. 1985 ended up being Klecko's last time playing all 16 games, but he left behind a legacy of versatility and dominance during his 12-year playing career. Next up, we have Fred Smerlas. Smerlas was a true gap-plugging nose tackle who ate up space and freed up rush lanes for his teammates to get to the quarterback. According to Hall of Fame center Dwight Stevenson, I never saw the guy have a bad game. As a nose tackle, Fred played the position better than anyone in the NFL. He did his job, keeping his linebackers free and tying up a couple men in the middle. Smerlas was also incredibly reliable, starting 149 straight games at a position that is incredibly physically demanding. But unlike Smerlas, the next player that we'll be looking at gained immediate notoriety as soon as he stepped into the league. William the Refrigerator Perry was drafted to the Bears in 1985, which is a hell of a year to join that defense. Yet him being picked by the Bears caused issues, as head coach Mike Ditka was the one who scouted and advocated for the Bears to pick Perry, while defensive coordinator Buddy Ryan called it a wasted pick. The 85 Bears defense is legendary, and although Perry was by no means the most important player on that side of the ball, he still played a vital role as the de facto nose tackle on Buddy Ryan's 46 defense. Perry's most famous moment, of course, doesn't even come on defense, as he ran in a touchdown during the Super Bowl. Because Buddy Ryan initially refused to use Perry on defense, Ditka also used the fridge multiple times on offense throughout the season, either as Walter Payton's lead blocker or receiving the ball as a fullback, where he had 2 touchdowns in his rookie year. There's no denying that Perry is a big guy, big by even NFL standards, and his teammates even called him Biscuit, as in one biscuit shy of 350 pounds. But he also suffered with weight issues throughout his entire playing career, with his highest unconfirmed playing weight at 382 pounds. Yet, Perry still managed to play 10 years in the NFL while recording 29.5 sacks and 524 total tackles. The last pre-1990s nose tackle I wanted to highlight is Jerry Ball. The 63rd overall pick by the Detroit Lions in the 1987 NFL Draft, Jerry Ball was a force in the middle of the defensive line throughout his career. Ball often took on double and even sometimes triple teams by opposing offensive lines, and even with that kind of attention, he was still able to get to the quarterback as he racked up 32.5 sacks in his 13-year career, with 9 sacks coming in the 1989 season. Jerry Ball was traded to Cleveland in 1993 and bounced around a few teams, eventually landing in Minnesota during his final years in the NFL, being paired up with John Randall and helping the Vikings reach the NFC Championship game where they lost in overtime to the Falcons. As we get into the 1990s, we start with one of the most dominant defensive players of the decade, which is Seattle's Cortez Kennedy. In Kennedy's 11-year career with the Seahawks, he recorded 58 sacks, 669 tackles, and was named first-team All-Pro 3 years in a row and won Defensive Player of the Year in 1992. The Seahawks only had 2 winning seasons during Tez's time in Seattle, but Kennedy could single-handedly wreck games and drag his terrible offense to a win. I mean, look at these game results in 1992. There were 8 times the Seahawks scored 7 or less points. So really the only time Seattle won in their 2-14 season were because of Kennedy. Like in week 3, when Kennedy recorded 7 tackles, 3 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles in a 10-6 win over New England, or in week 13, when Kennedy had 7 tackles again and 1 sack in a 16-13 overtime win against the Broncos. Kennedy retired following the 2000 season and unfortunately passed away in 2017 at the age of 48, but left behind a legacy of dominance and is forever enshrined in Canton. Next up, we have the Goose. Tony Siragusa was a UDFA who was originally signed by the Colts back in 1990. Siragusa spent 7 seasons in Indianapolis stuffing the middle of the defensive line and even getting to the quarterback on occasion with 16.5 sacks recorded in his time with the Colts. His best statistical year was in 94, where he had 5 sacks and 88 tackles. But the Colts defense in 95 was 5th in the league in points allowed and ranked 6th in rushing yards allowed. That team made it to the AFC Championship game where they narrowly lost to the Steelers. Then in 1997, the Goose signed with the Baltimore Ravens, and this is where he really gained his notoriety. Not only were the Ravens Super Bowl champs in 2000 with by far the best defense in the NFL and letting up less than 1,000 yards on the ground, but in the following offseason, Siragusa was introduced to America on the first ever season of Hard Knocks. Next up, we have the 17-year career of Ted Washington. Off rip, it's crazy for any NFL player to have a 17-year career, but it's even crazier when that player is a nose tackle. Washington was a first-round draft pick by the 49ers in the 1991 NFL Draft. But Washington's play really took off when he was a member of the Buffalo Bills. Signing with Buffalo in the 1995 offseason, Washington played nose tackle and lined up next to Bruce Smith, which produced results. Washington stood stout in the middle of the line, while players like Bruce Smith, Bryce Paup, and Phil Hansen were all able to reach double-digit sack totals. In his second year in Buffalo, Washington recorded 92 tackles and 3.5 sacks as the Bills went up to 6th in the league in points against. Ted Washington made it to 3 Pro Bowls in Buffalo and then reached first-team All-Pro honors during his only healthy year in Chicago. He was then traded to the Patriots in 2003 where they won the Super Bowl and was a part of the best defense in the league in terms of points against. The rest of his career was spent in Oakland and Cleveland, with Washington deciding to retire after being released. This next player started his career as a linebacker, who was 250 pounds and ran a 4.5 40 in college, but eventually evolved into a 340-pound nose tackle later on in his NFL career. Keith Traylor spent his first few seasons with the Broncos, serving as an inside linebacker, but couldn't quite find his footing in the league, being released by 4 teams during his first 4 years in the league. Traylor eventually made his way to Europe, playing for the Barcelona Dragons, and this is where he started to put on weight and moved himself into the interior defensive line. After a few productive seasons in KC, Traylor found his way back to Denver and became a vital piece of a Broncos team that won back-to-back Super Bowls. Traylor then found himself in Chicago playing alongside the previously mentioned Ted Washington, controlling the middle of the line and giving us an incredible 67-yard interception return. The Bears' defense was amazing in 2001, and Traylor and the defensive line consistently held their opponents under 100 rushing yards. In 2004, Traylor signed with the Patriots, and this is his first season officially listed at the nose, where he split time with another player that we'll get to later on in this video. The Patriots won the Super Bowl this season, and Traylor started 2 out of New England's 3 playoff games and gave himself his 3rd Super Bowl ring. Keith Traylor finished out his career in Miami, as the team needed a nose tackle after Nick Saban implemented a defensive scheme that used a 3-4 alignment on occasion. He ended his career with 437 tackles, 20 sacks, and 129 interception return yards on 2 picks, which is a crazy stat. The next man in the middle might have one of the best nicknames of all time, and that belongs to Gilbert Brown, the Gravedigger. After being drafted by the Vikings and then waived during final roster cuts due to his weight, Brown ended up spending his entire 10-year NFL career with the Green Bay Packers. During this time, Brown played a key role on some dominant Packers defenses, including in 1996, where Green Bay only let up 19 touchdowns the entire season with a defensive line of Brown, Reggie White, Santana Dotson, and Sean Jones. Brown never really had great counting stats in terms of total tackles or sacks, but his power and speed at his size were undeniable. He also had a Burger King burger named after him called the Gilbert Burger, which was a double Whopper with extra everything, cut in half, with extra cheese and no pickles. Sam Adams is the next player that we'll be looking at. Now, Adams did play alongside Cortez Kennedy in Seattle and with the Goose in Baltimore, so it could be weird to call him a nose tackle. but Adams was still as much of a monster in the middle of the line, and just look at him. He's an absolute unit. Adams was the 7th overall pick in the 1994 NFL Draft, and throughout his entire NFL career, Adams just produced. He recorded a good amount of tackles, had sack production, and of course stopped the run, batted down passes, and even had 2 pick sixes, including one of the most iconic big man plays of all time. Adams was named to 3 Pro Bowls and 1 All-Pro team during his 14-year career, and just like the Goose, was a part of the dominant 2000 Baltimore Ravens defense. Adams just also had the nose tackle look down to a T, the cowboy collar, the big face mask, and just the stature. Funny enough, we have another crossover player who lined up with both Sam Adams and Ted Washington, and that player is Pat Williams. I don't think Williams was truly classified as a nose tackle until later in his career with the Vikings, but I don't want to ignore his 8 seasons in Buffalo. Williams wasn't a full-time starter until 2001, coincidentally the season that Ted Washington left for the Chicago Bears. The Bills' defense wasn't very good in Williams' first few years as a starter, but they jumped up to 5th in points allowed in 2003 and then 8th in 2004, where Williams also had a pick 6 of his own. But before going to his time in Minnesota, there is a game from 1998 that I wanted to look at. Heading into a Week 14 matchup against the Bengals, Pat Williams only had half of his sack, but in that game alone, he recorded 3 sacks, all in the 4th quarter. Williams ended the season with just 3.5 sacks, and then never recorded 3 sacks in a season ever again in his career. But when looking at his time with the Vikings, Williams was used as a Tampa 2 nose tackle, where the position is expected to command a double team from the center and guard, which frees up other linemen to be one-on-one with their blockers. He and fellow interior D lineman Kevin Williams made up the Williams Wall, and these 2 players were the main reasons why the Vikings were able to maintain the league's best rushing defense from 06 to 08. During that 3-season stretch, Pat Williams made 3 Pro Bowls and 2nd team All-Pro, eventually retiring following the 2010 season. The last player I wanted to highlight from the 1990s is Jamal Williams. Chosen in the 2nd round of the 1998 NFL Supplemental Draft, Williams' career really took off in 2004. Coincidentally, the year when the Chargers switched to a 3-4 defense and placed Williams at the nose. Starting in 2004, Williams made an All-Pro team in 3 straight years, while also making the Pro Bowl in 3 straight years. And from 2004 to 2006, the Chargers' run defense ranked 3rd, 1st, and 7th, with Williams manning the middle. Like the nose tackles before him, Williams took on double and triple teams, because he also demanded that kind of attention of those assignments. And while taking up so much attention from the O-line, this freed up Sean Merriman and Sean Phillips to sack the quarterback and wreck games. Let's now get into the 2000s and get to some of the best nose tackles that the game has ever seen. First, let's cover the career of Chris Jenkins. Father of current Bengals defensive lineman Chris Jenkins, Jenkins was a 2nd-round pick in the 2001 NFL Draft by the Panthers. Jenkins made an immediate impact in Carolina, as in his first 3 years, he had 124 tackles, 14 sacks, and made 1st team All-Pro in 2002 and 2003. Jenkins also had a game against the Bucs where he blocked 2 kicks, including an extra point that would have won the game, which was Martin Grammatica's first missed conversion in his entire career. The next 2 seasons, Jenkins dealt with injuries, and then only spent 2 more seasons in Carolina before being traded to the Jets. His first season in New York saw a high level of play by Jenkins, as he made 2nd team All-Pro with 52 tackles, 7 TFLs, 9 QB hits, and 3.5 sacks. Unfortunately, Jenkins tore his ACL early into the 2009 season, and then only played 1 more game after that before announcing his retirement in 2011. The next player is Casey Hampton, who was utilized as a true nose tackle throughout his entire 12-year career with the Steelers. Big Snack was drafted 19th overall in 2001 and was a key component of some incredible Steelers defenses. Pittsburgh's run defense was consistently at the top of the league while Hampton lined up in the middle, and allowed the least amount of rushing yards on multiple occasions. Like in 2010, the Steelers only allowed 100+ rushing yards twice throughout the entire regular season and playoffs. Hampton consistently plugged the middle of the offensive line and freed up other members of the Steelers defense just to do their thing. The Steelers defense was loaded with talent during this era, but Hampton's contributions to this team should never be forgotten. This next player is in the running for the best nose tackle of all time, and also probably has the most nose tackle build of all time, and that belongs to the one and only Vince Wilfork. Drafted in the 1st round of the 2004 NFL Draft, Wilfork contributed right away as he split nose tackle starting time with another player with a great nose tackle build in Keith Traylor. But starting in his sophomore year, Wilfork was a full-time starter in the middle of the Patriots' defensive line and was regularly seen as the best nose tackle in the league while he was active. He would take on 2 offensive linemen no problem, and was even the unsung hero in one of the greatest NFL bloopers of all time in the butt fumble. So we all have Vince Wilfork to thank for that. But don't let his build deceive you, because Vince Wilfork was a capital A athlete. To be his size and move the way that he did is unfathomable. And one of my favorite clips of him is from later in his career, and he isn't even on the football field. It's when he's playing basketball, looking like Escalade on the court. While in New England, Wilfork made 5 Pro Bowls, second team All-Pro 3 times, and first team All-Pro once. Wilfork signed with the Texans in 2015, where he played 2 seasons and solidified his career as one of the most dominant defensive players of this century. Now we have Jay Ratliff. Ratliff was drafted by the Cowboys, who were looking to use him originally as a defensive end. But starting in the 2007 season, Ratliff took over as starting nose tackle and began to dominate opposing offensive linemen. From 2008 to 2011, Ratliff made 4 Pro Bowls in 4 years and was named first team All-Pro in 2009. He was considered to be undersized for the position, but he was still able to push past double teams and even get to the quarterback, as he had 7.5 sacks and 6 sacks in 2008 and 2009 respectively. Ratliff struggled with injuries in 2012, with things becoming tense with the team and Jerry Jones during the rehab process. After he was released by Dallas, Ratliff signed with the Bears, where he spent the rest of his career, but still missed games with injuries and off-field issues, eventually being released in 2015. This next player played all across the defensive line, but he did spend a few seasons lined up at nose tackle, and that player is Haloti Ngata. As a 5-star recruit and rugby player coming out of high school, Haloti Ngata was the 12th overall pick in the 2006 NFL Draft by the Baltimore Ravens. Ngata's first season listed at the nose was in 2008, where he made his first All-Pro team with 55 tackles, a sack, and 2 interceptions. The Ravens were 3rd in run defense this year and only had 2 games in the regular season where they let up over 100 yards. But unfortunately, one of those games was to the Giants, where they let up 202 yards. After 4 years of dominant play from Ngata, where he lined up as defensive end and made 2 first team and 2 second team All-Pro selections, Ngata went back inside in 2013. Of course, statistically, his years at nose tackle weren't as impressive as his seasons at defensive end, but he was still able to make his impact felt on the Ravens defense. Ngata was traded to the Lions ahead of the 2015 season and served as D-tackle on some okay to poor Lions defensive units. Haloti's last year was spent with the Eagles, where he started 9 games and officially retired as a Baltimore Raven after signing a 1-day contract on May 28, 2019. The final nose tackle from the 2000s that I wanted to highlight didn't play for many years in the decade, but he had some iconic moments that his team's fanbase will remember forever. BJ Raji was the 9th overall pick in the 2009 NFL Draft. In his rookie year, he played 14 games, but only started 1. And for the season, Raji had 1 sack, 25 tackles, and 5 TFLs. In his second year, Raji managed to put up 6.5 sacks, 10 TFLs, and 9 quarterback hits on a defense that ranked 2nd in points allowed and filled up space in the middle to allow his fellow rushers to accumulate 47 sacks, which tied for 2nd in the NFL. The 2010 postseason also included Raji's most iconic moment, which was in the NFC Championship game against the Bears, where Raji dropped back into coverage and had a pick 6 on Caleb Haney and proceeded to hit his iconic celebration in the end zone. 2011 saw Raji's first and only Pro Bowl appearance, where he had 3 sacks and 22 tackles. He also did have a rushing touchdown this season against the Buccaneers. In 2013, Raji transitioned to defensive end following injuries to the Packers' defensive line and started all 16 games, but only had 17 tackles and failed to record a sack. Raji sat out the entire 2014 season with a torn bicep, and his final season came in 2015, where he was back at the nose. Ahead of the 2016 season, Raji announced his retirement, but said he'd be coming back to the league, indicating that this was just a hiatus, but hasn't played a single snap of professional football since. The first nose tackle of the 2010s that I wanted to bring up is Linval Joseph. Joseph had a long 15-year career in the NFL, where he spent most of his time with the Minnesota Vikings. After signing a 5-year contract with the Vikings in the 2014 offseason, Joseph's time in Minnesota started out rocky, as he was shot in August with a bullet hitting him in his calf. But Joseph still managed to play and start all 16 games that season. In 2015, Linval had 56 tackles in 12 games, with 7 TFLs but only 4 quarterback hits. But in his next 2 seasons, Joseph made back-to-back Pro Bowls as he forced 3 forced fumbles, had 77 tackles, 17 QB hits, and 3 sacks in 2016, and 3.5 sacks and nearly 68 tackles in 2017. Mike Zimmer said of Joseph that, "I don't want to get too gushy here, but I've had a couple of really good nose tackles in my career. This guy is maybe the best." In the 2017 offseason, Linval Joseph signed a 4-year, $50 million contract extension, but only played 2 more seasons in Minnesota before being released, eventually signing with the Chargers ahead of the 2020 season. 2020 was the last time Joseph played all 16 games, as he bounced around 3 separate teams during his last 3 years in the NFL. Joseph also gave us another great thick 6, with a 63-yard touchdown return where he hit 18.6 miles per hour at 332 pounds, which is nuts. Next up, we have Damon Snacks Harrison. Harrison went undrafted out of William Penn University and eventually signed with the Jets as a UDFA in 2012. He only played 5 games in his rookie year, but proceeded to start all 16 games in his second season, where he recorded 66 tackles with a sack. He started all 16 games in his next 2 seasons with the Jets, and after signing a 5-year contract with the Giants, Harrison made first-team All-Pro in 2016 as he put up 86 tackles with 2.5 sacks and a forced fumble. During his time in the NFL, Harrison was seen as one of, if not the best, run stuffers in the league. So even though he wasn't known for his pass rush, his ability to stop the run and clog up the middle of the line made him immensely valuable for the teams that he played on. But after only 1 more year with the Giants, Harrison was traded to the Lions, which he wasn't a fan of. And this was reflected in his play, as his run-stopping abilities dramatically reduced in 2019. He was released by Detroit ahead of the 2020 season and only played 7 games with the Seahawks and Packers before retiring in 2021. Now we finally get to our first active player in this video, and that is Vita Vea. I find Vita Vea's entire football career very fascinating. From a former high school running back that was 270 pounds as a freshman, to playing nose tackle for the first time in college, to coming back from a midseason leg fracture to help contribute to the Buccaneers winning the Super Bowl. Vita Vea remains one of the most underrated defensive players in the NFL. Levante David said of Vita Vea that Vita Vea is one of those guys who doesn't get talked about a lot, but he's one of those guys who kind of makes our defense go. At his size and build, you'd assume that Vita Vea is just a run-stuffing nose tackle. And he is great against the run, as Tampa Bay's defense was more effective against inside runs with Vita Vea manning the middle, allowing only 3.7 yards per carry compared to 4.7 yards per carry when he was off the field in 2024. But Vea has been able to show that he is consistently able to get to the quarterback, as in his last 3 seasons, he's put up 7, 5.5, and 6.5 sacks. Also in his last 3 seasons, Vea has put up the second most pressures in the NFL from the nose tackle position. This all leads us to the final nose tackle of this video, who is very well on track to being one of, if not the best nose tackle of all time, which is Dexter Lawrence. Dexter Lawrence is an absolute monster at the nose tackle position. Not only is he one of the best run defenders in the NFL, but he is also one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. And not just compared to other nose tackles, but compared to any defensive player. Lawrence is the only interior defensive lineman with a 90+ grade in both pass rush and run defense since 2022. And like I previously mentioned, Vea had the second most pressures from the nose position at 23 over the past 3 seasons. How many did Lawrence have? Try 103. This is also made more impressive by the fact that he has faced the highest double team rate of any interior defensive lineman by almost double the next one. He's averaged 5 sacks a season in his 6-year career, with his highest sack total coming in 2024 with 9 in just 12 games played. Lawrence is still only 28 years old and in the prime of his career, with weapons on weapons next to him on the Giants defensive line. So I'm very excited to watch the rest of his career and witness the damage he's able to inflict on the league. Again, I don't know if Dexter Lawrence has truly cemented himself as the best nose tackle in NFL history, in part because he's only entering his 7th season. But I can confidently say that he is the best pass rushing nose tackle that the game has ever seen. We still have younger nose tackles that are carrying the legacy forward for the position in our game today, but I think the glory days of the nose tackle position are fading in the rearview mirror. But we should never forget the size, strength, and skill that these big boys in the middle brought to the game of football and the legacies that they've left behind.